Hey guys, this is Julian Gray. Today we're going to be diving into my brand new track Static with my good friend Zashanell. This is my debut on Anjunabeats, which is a big honor for us. We've been fans of the label, Group Therapy, Above and Beyond, and a lot of the Anjuna artists for years now, and it's a big honor to be inducted into that really prestigious family. A few things to start. I wrote this song around a top line that Zay Chanel wrote. She wrote the song and it meant something to her, and she wanted me to write around it. We've been friends for several years after I reached out to her. I think in like 2014 or 15 when I heard her work with No Mana, another Mousetrap friend of mine. And ever since then, we've wanted to work on a song together. So she had sent over a few top lines. Nothing was really sticking, but this one was something that I think she found special and had a meaning to her. And I think I could detect that and sense that in the writing of the song. So I got her top line. She sent it over to me, and then I, in about a day or two, wrote the basis of Static around that top line. And then yeah, so we consider the song more of a collaborative effort than a feature. In a traditional sense, if I wrote a production and then a vocalist hops on it and sings over it, then I consider that more of a feature. But in this case, she was integral to the songwriting process, and her writing was, what inspired the entire production. As you can see, I'm not in my normal studio, so bear with me if the quality isn't up to my normal Julian Gray media standard, if you're a fan of my YouTube channel. But COVID and all of the things going on in the world right now have prevented me from getting back to my studio. So on that note, I hope you all are safe and are, keeping quarantined and what have you. Without any further ado, let's hop into Ableton here and let's take a look at the project file. It's not overly complicated, but there are a few really cool things going on. Okay, so to start things off, we're going to hop into Ableton here and take a look at what we have. We're going to play this thing from the start so that we have an idea of how everything fits together. I'd rather do it like that than go from top to bottom or something like that, just so we can make sure we get to everything. So to start things off, we're just going to play the song through, and then we'll pick out things as we hear them, and I'll explain how they were made. The track is not overly complicated. There's only 28 channels. This is actually a useless channel. There's probably a few more. Yeah, these arrangement channels up here are actually not being used. They're just there for the sake of the arrangement. And to you new producers, if you ever struggle with arranging your tracks out, I encourage you to try creating a MIDI clip at the top of your tracks. One clip for your mixes. So this is my original mix. This is my extended. I guess I didn't label that correctly. But yeah, so then you can click on this and do Command L just to loop a section so that you can grab your extended mix, your main mix, or you can do this for each individual section as well. So you can visualize, okay, this is where my verse is, this is my intro is, etc. So that's just a quick tip. Pretty irrelevant to the rest of the video, but something that really helped me solidify my arrangements when I was just first learning. So we're going to start things off by pressing play, and we're going to listen through the first few elements of the song. We're going to be looking at the extended mix on this one because the original is essentially the same thing with some stuff removed. So let's go ahead and hit play. Okay, as you can see in the extended mix of the song, we start with the drums, and there's no better place to start than with the kick. And the kick is just 2 kick samples, 1 transient click, and 1 low thud. We have a more subby kick, and we have the top end. The two together create that nice balance between the sub driviness, I guess for lack of a better word, and that nice transient mallet on the canvas thwack of a good kick drum. That's just our sub, and that's just our click rather, and we get that really strong kick out of that. We have a reverse clap, which is just a reverse of the same clap. We're going to check out the clap really quick. First, all right, so let's go ahead and press play. Very simple stuff, guys. We have 2 claps. What makes this really cool is the shift. There's a slight shift of 1 clap before the other, I'd say a few milliseconds. And that's creating that really cool old school progressive house kind of sound that like deadmau5, Cascade, Adam K, really popularized by those kind of artists, where you have a very like movement-y clap. It has a lot of motion to it, and it doesn't feel so stagnant as just a single sample. 2 layers like that, a little bit of high boost and a compressor to sum them a bit, and that's our clap. We have a recording of that clap reversed into itself to create our reverse clap, which is very deadmau5y, admittedly. Again, falling back in line with that old progressive style. We have our hi-hats, which are essentially just 3 hi-hats, one of which is a Matt Lang hi-hat. Good friend of mine. I did a remix of his track Space Between with my friends at Mousetrap not too long ago. I encourage you to go check that out if you like techno. But he has this really nice sensibility of these soft, really tasteful hi-hats. So I used that as our primary hi-hat, doing that 16th note shuffle underneath. As you can see, there's a little bit of velocity automation here to make sure that we really get some motion going and it's not so stagnant. In techno, you can get away with just slamming full velocity 16th note hi-hats, but in things like progressive house and deep house, you really have to go for a little bit more movement, make it feel a little bit more groovy. There's 2 other hi-hats here. There's this guy, which is kind of noisy. It has a lot of like particles in it. And then we have this Mark Knight hi-hat for our upbeats, and that's these really cool housey, again, upbeat hi-hats. Then we have some toms. This is very similar to the toms I used in my track Touch over with my friends at 03 with Pippa Morin. And it's a melodic techno technique that's kind of bled into other genres that I write, like progressive and trance. I'm a very eclectic producer that way, where I like to write a lot of different things to get a sense of how other people do it and how I can apply those cool techniques of like techno to trance or progressive or what have you. But yeah, so I have just these 2 808 toms. I'm sorry, this one. Real simple, just the standard 808s in Ableton. To create this really cool motion in the bottom end. And I do that in my track with Pippa as well. Really nice. And again, very melodic techno feeling. Here's our hi-hats with it. Reverse clap. And that is actually all of our drums for the most part. There's some smaller stuff going on here. I have this Kabasa effect. If I actually just go ahead and mute all the effects on it, I can just show you what it sounds like without it. This is that transitionary sound you hear throughout the song. It's just a small sample, but with all of the effects on it, you get this really dreamlike transitionary effect. Just a few reverbs, one reverb, a delay. Here's the reverb if you want to see it. Not too much. 4-count delay, and then a slight Haas effect with this, left and right variance. Really cool effect. It's very akin to like deadmau5's The Velt. He does kind of a similar thing to establish the space in the song in that track. Yeah, so there's that. And I think that's most of the percussion. I think there's some small little things I add here and there. Like there's this snare buildup in the buildup section of the song. As you can see, it's just a rolling 909 snare with some velocity automation. And then I have a reverb on it and a high sweep. And I actually like to do this on most of the elements in the song. You'll come to find when we start looking at the bass sounds in a minute, is that I like to sweep out some of that low end right before the drop and kind of accentuate the high end. In this case, we're accentuating the high end. We're really bringing in the full force of this snare. But in our bass elements, I like to remove the low end right before the drop so that you have that contrast. Think about when you're at the club, or if you're listening on like an expensive hi-fi with a subwoofer. The thing that conveys the most energy and that feeling of like, wow, the music's engrossing me, is that low end energy. And you kind of sabotage that feeling of the low kind of hitting you when the drop hits if there's low end already present in your breakdown. So I always like to remove the low end from as much as I can right before the drop, accentuate the high end. In this case, that's what we're doing here. The snare coming in full force is bringing up that high end energy and, you know, sonics, I guess. All of the high-end sonics of the snare are coming through here, and we're really building up that energy here. And then when we hit the drop, we reveal the low end. That also applies to the there's a element called the soft kick I use in certain parts of the song. Let me see if I can find that. Here it is. And I'm doing that here as well. So I'm sweeping the bottom out of this kick, which actually doesn't have much bottom as it is already. As you can see, as I remove that bottom end, it's creating this tension of like, where's the low end? And then when the drop finally kicks in, you get this really nice resolve of that low end coming back. So that is actually all of the percussion of the song. Really, really simple. First like 5 minutes of the video, we've gotten through all of the drums. We'll get into the Vox later. That's a little bit more complicated. But really, the track is not that complicated. There's only like 25 songs, which is a far cry from a lot of my other music where I have like 70, 80 tracks or channels in a song. And I think that that's a testament to like, you don't need a million things to get an idea across. I have this idea of minimalism and trying to get the most out of the smallest amount of things that I have in a channel or track. Rather than layering 1,000 things, I like to keep it as minimal as possible and getting the most out of each individual element. Sure, there are tracks that I've written. I have a few on Mousetrap that are very complicated and a lot of different layers. But generally, almost never do I have more than 5 things playing at a single time. I want to keep it very minimal. And it allows the mix to become easier to handle, and it becomes easier for the listener to digest when you don't overwhelm them with stimulus at once, which can be good in some genres and some styles, but not for this kind of stuff. Okay, so we've gone through the drums. Next up, let's go ahead and tackle the melodic elements here. The first one is that signature bass chord that you find in a lot of my music. This one is very similar to my track Touch with Pippa Morin, again over on 03. It's essentially a root note with a fifth up an octave. I do this a lot in my stuff. Again, very melodic techno. I'll go ahead and play it for you. And if we look at the MIDI here, it's just a root note, dun, or dun, 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 and this is dun, 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 dun. It's a harmony, which is the fifth of that root note up an octave. I do it a lot, and it's pretty common in melodic techno. And again, that's like my eclecticism coming out. I like to borrow things from other genres and try to introduce them into other things I'm working on. I don't believe in being a genre artist. I always like to expand the boundaries a little bit more than that. So sound design wise, it's a very simple sound. We have a saw wave with 7 voices with a little bit of detune and a envelope controlling the cutoff, creating this really nice basic pluck sound that is, a staple of my music, I think. Some delay, reverb. I'll let you producers pause it and look at my presets, but I'm not going to harp on them. A little bit of EQ, high-end boost, or high-end removal rather, high-end accentuation by removal of the bass. And we do that here just to sweep out the bottom, just to bring it in. So it's almost like slowly introducing that bass without just automating our volume. I think filter automation is a little bit more interesting. On this guy, we have some filter automation as well into our buildups, as you can see. And you can feel that low start to rise. It gives it this really nice energy. It's like it feels like it's opening up. And we build all the way up, and then we drop it into a pluck, which we'll get into in a moment. But there's one other parameter here, which I think is pretty cool. This is amount. And you can actually, in Serum, it's something that a lot of people don't know. If you have, let's say, an envelope that's controlling your filter. In this case, we have this envelope controlling the filter cutoff of this low-pass 12 filter. And let's say that you have a part of your song that you want the bass to not actually be moved by that modulation tool, let's say the envelope in this case. You want to just leave it at a certain level and maintain the notes playing. You can actually automate the amount that the envelope is controlling the filter with a second macro. So when this knob is up, this envelope is controlling the filter. But when it's down, this envelope no longer controls this filter. And that makes it really nice for things like this, towards the end of the song, where I just want to have the note play and then fade in, rather than having the initial hit of that envelope come in and then down and then back up. If that makes any sense at all. I'm sure some of you producers will get something from that. But it's just a small thing that I think is worth mentioning about Serum that a lot of people don't realize, and it's a very powerful tool. Okay, so I have that bass chord playing. Then over top of that, I have these strings that are just playing this chord throughout the entire song, creating this tension. And it's created by this Labs plugin by Spitfire. If you need orchestral strings and you don't have $1 million to spend on presets or synths or what have you, I highly suggest picking up Spitfire Audio's Labs plugin. It's a free plugin. They do great work in the professional environment, but they also have these awesome free plugins. So we're just playing a chord. I think it's I want to say it's a A sharp. No, actually it's a D sharp chord with an octave, and the A sharp is inverted. Weird chord voicing here, but it creates this really nice, like, tense feeling. You can hear here. High boost. And we're going through this plugin called Roth Air. It's another freebie. It's a plugin to generate artificial high end without being as destructive as something like an OTT, which really, really wrecks your sound, which can be nice in certain circumstances like basses or what have you. But when you're just trying to get a little bit extra high end, and you need to generate some where you can't boost something that doesn't exist. So if your sound doesn't have that high end, you can use this to generate that high end, and then create that nice shiny feeling that we needed for something like these strings. A little bit of reverb on there as well, and with the bass sound you get this really nice tension when the chords on the bass change, but they don't change on these strings. You can hear it's actually a 3-part harmony in some places, where you have the root, the fifth, and then there's additional notes in this chord here that create this really nice harmonically rich soundscape. We have this floaty top element, which is essentially the strings again. We do move on this one. It's not just holding the note legato like the strings. The sound is really simple, just a 3-voice unison saw wave with some reverb and a high cut, so we aren't clouding up that top end. We want to leave that for the strings. Play it on its own. And the purpose of these 2 layers here are really just to create tension against that bass chord, which I think harmonic tension and harmonization, I think, is one of the keys to Julian Gray style music. I think that's like the cornerstone of a lot of my writing. And going off of that, actually this piano here is meant to accentuate the notes that are playing in our bass and these 2 layers here. If we go ahead and play this, you'll hear that. Quick look at the preset. It's just the giant in contact Valhalla vintage verb with a copious amount of reverb, which I don't usually do because I don't like to cloud the dry signal with too much wet signal because it takes away from the integrity of the sound. I just wanted to really bury this sound for some reason. And I put a compressor to flatten the dynamics of that reverb and the dry signal, and then I have a little bit of sidechain. But aside from that preset stuff, let's go ahead and look at the MIDI itself, because I think this is really interesting. We're accentuating the note movement of the bass. So when the bass comes and gives you that little melodic riff right here, that motif that goes da-da-dum, it's setting up the next note, but we kind of play off of that motif with our piano to, instead of just landing, we kind of fall. And then we build it up here into the next note. So we cadence into this melody here with the piano now, which it's kind of flipped roles. We're switching from this motif into this one, and then we use this one to lead into this part. And then we have this really nice part right here where the three notes, the two notes of the bass are playing two notes of the chord, and then this one is playing the third note, and you're getting this three-piece triad. I believe it's a triad at least. Might be also a different chord, but you're getting this the three-note chord here that's conveyed because the piano is harmonizing with that two-part harmonizing bass already, and you get this really satisfying feeling when the piano kind of falls in line with the bass, and you get this nice harmonization effect. It does that throughout the song too. We use it in supporting elements here, but for the most part, you know, the piano is kind of in the background. So we've covered that. Let's dive into the pluck, because I did mention that a moment ago. Let's go ahead and take a look at this. It's important to actually figure out where it's coming from. So in the song, we're building up to this pluck moment by creating this tension with our bass chord pad. So we're going. See, it feels like something's coming. But instead of revealing something bigger, we kind of drop it smaller, and it's kind of Anjuna style, and I think that's why it works so well on the label. We go from this big buildup down into this really serene, basic pluck sound. Again, it's a very simple preset to the other pad. Almost all of my Julian Gray sounds are developed based on a saw wave with a small amount of unison voices and a little bit of detune with a low-pass filter automation. So if you take anything away from this video, I think it's that sound design is not as complicated as you think it is. It's more about picking the right note placements and using sounds that are compatible with one another. So diving in, we go right into this pluck, same MIDI as our bass chord. Very cool. Really basic processing with a slight delay. Again, nothing going on here minus a cutoff automation that we're using into certain parts of the song. Other than that, we have a sidechain and a filter, which is just, you know, removing some top end in places where it feels like it needs to. Okay, so we have the pluck, and we have all of our melodic elements of our intro part here. Let's go ahead and take a look at the main melody, if you will. A lot of people think it's a guitar or something. It's actually a DX7, or at least a DX7 emulator. This is a sound that is that traditional 80s bell sound that you hear in a lot of synth pop and 80s music in general. It's kind of synonymous with the Julian Gray sound at this point. It's a sound that I use all the time. Usually not a actual DX7 emulation. I actually try to recreate the sound with Serum or similar. But, you know, in this case, we actually use the DX7V from Arturia. It's a pretty simple concept, actually. It's just, you know, an FM synth. I'll give a brief overlook of all of this. I think it's essentially a preset in DX7 with some minor adjustments to the envelope timings and maybe a few to the operators. But in general, it's not that complicated. The melody itself follows my rule of minimalism and melodic symmetry. A brief overview of that is that I like to always, if I play this exact rhythm in the first bar, I want to use that rhythm in subsequent bars. So this rhythm, as you can see here, it's just it's a pretty simple rhythm, actually, all things considered. It's only 5 eighth notes in a row, but I actually want to use that exact same timing in the next bar, or in the next bar that music is playing. There's actually a bar in between. And what that does is it creates this rhythm in the listener's head. So if you listen to like old Deadmau5, or if you listen to old Cascade, or Porter Robinson, or those sort of artists, there's a lot of melodic repetition. Eric Prydz is a really good example as well, where you have a rhythm of the melody repeating over and over again. I think this is it's a byproduct of old drum machines or old sequencers, where you had a limited amount you could change, where you could sequence an 8-bar melody, and then you could only change the notes. You couldn't really change the syncopation without it being weird. But that's an idea that I like to carry on in my music now. So if I do this rhythm here, I like to do it here as well. And I take the melody and I maybe duplicate it and make some minor adjustments to it. And what that does is the listener is always, as they're listening to this melody, they're getting that rhythm stuck in their head, the do-do-do-do, do-do-do-do. And it doesn't even matter the notes necessarily. You're getting the rhythm stuck in their head, and then their mind can automatically plug in the right notes. And that's what creates those earworms, because then if you heard the same melody 50 times or 100 times in a song, a 3-minute song, that rhythm is bound to be stuck in your head, right? So then you can apply some notes to it, and then you get a really catchy, earwormy melody. That's why Deadmau5 and Eric Prydz are so catchy. So yeah, I did that here. The sound is pretty easy. Delay, reverb, high boost, and a little bit of low pass for some certain sections. I kind of want to lose some energy and then build it back up towards the drop, so I get rid of some of the high end and then bring it back in later. So yeah, so that's the melody. Not much more to that. I think for the most part that's it. There's a few other things. What is this guy? Kind of like a Juno ripoff kind of synth. Essentially, we have an 11-voice saw wave with some detune and some fine-tune automation via a sine wave. We're doing this so we can artificially create that feeling of imperfection that analog gear has, where you kind of drift in and out of key a little bit. Really, really nice. We're doing it at a quarter note. We're out of a little bit of white noise in there too to create some, cool energy. Here's a look at the MIDI. For the most part, it's standard chords, just inverted or augmented in some way. Yeah, it's following the main melody of the song too. So that's with the pluck. There's two other elements here. We just have this big pad, which is very similar to that pad we just played. It's just down an octave. We're doing an octave saw wave here. A little bit of modulation on the cutoff filter here with an envelope, and some minor fine-tune automation there as well, just like last time. Then we have a sub playing through. It's just the root note of the chord pad, drop down an octave, and playing on a sine wave. Very, very simple stuff, guys. So all of this together sounds something like this, and then this probably sounds really familiar. The piano comes in about halfway through. In the background there. Very, very nice. Other than that, there's some small things going on. We have a build-up kind of riser sound here. It's essentially just a saw wave pulsating at a rate of a quarter note with the LFO opening. We're high passing again for that same reason as we described before. The low end, keeping it in there kind of detracts from the drop impact, so I like to remove it right before. We have some reverb, some noise, and we're doing this automation via a MIDI pitch bend. And the pitch bend set in Serum is 12 semitones, which is an octave. So you get this full octave riser. In addition to that, we have a snare buildup here. Again, a rolling 909. Not extremely complicated. With some velocity changes over time. And by the way, a quick tip for any producer that's trying to do this. I know that it's really difficult to like, you know, shape these in a certain way that makes it like rise in a linear fashion. A quick tip to shorten that, you know, painstaking process is if you actually highlight the MIDI, you can hold Command and you can draw a vector that shapes your velocities. So that's a like deep in the depths of the Ableton manual that exists. So yeah, so I'm rolling the snare. We build all the way up to that point where it breaks and falls out, or the music falls out, and then we build it up again right here, as you can see. So from the bottom back up. Yep, very nice. That build up is here. We have one other thing, I believe that is our white noise, which is, you know, self-explanatory. Anyone that knows how to produce probably already knows how to do this. It's a white noise oscillator with a filter moving on it. There's a little bit of chorus on here just for some stereo image effect, and a high boost so we can cut some of the low end out of it, but essentially it's a white noise. Very easy. You can probably get away with just using a sample for this too. I just happen to, you know, make my own. Okay, so that's pretty much it besides the vocals. The vocals themselves are not too complicated either. So I actually got a comped and affected vocal from Zashanell. She had sent me almost a pristine, ready-to-go vocal. Her producer, or she, sent me the finished product, essentially. I didn't really have to do that much to it. I'll just go ahead and mute my processing really quick so you can hear what it sounds like without it.
It's always empty, always looking up to stargaze candlelights that lead me to you.
So that's the, you know, the dry vocal, but all the comping is still there.
Empty, always looking up to stargaze candlelight.
So all the stereo imaging and the multiple layers of that vocal was actually done on her end. I can't really comment on it, but what I did receive is really awesome. There's that Roth Air plugin to generate some crispness to the vocal. I don't want to use something like OTT on this guy because it's a little bit too soft of a song, so I just want to generate a little bit of high end with the Roth Air. Remove some of the low end. I think that low end kind of drags a vocal performance down. High end in a vocal creates energy and presence and clarity. If you have all that low end in there, it really detracts from that. Have some reverb. Very small amount. Enough that it's still conveying the space, but it's not detracting from the raw signal. If we had this at like 50 or 60%, it would start to eat away at the integrity of the vocal, and I don't want to do that. Then we have this nice compressor to flatten some of the dynamics of this and the dry signal. And we have some delay on there. And then delay and the high pass filter here are actually only used in a few spots. In particular, in the build-up section where she's saying, "Didn't know what it was to love, love, love." We just repeat that love over and over again, but we actually initiate more delay here, and we start to sweep the low end out so that we get this really tense build-up section. It's almost like she's whispering here. We have another EQ at the end here. I don't know what that was for. And then we have a sidechain. And then as we bring this in with the love, 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 we introduce the harmony layer here, which is her singing what it was to love. And these two together sound really nice in that build-up. And we're sweeping that in with the filter as well. A little bit of delay, reverb, and overdrive on this guy to really crunch it up. There's one more layer to our vocal sound. We have this guy here, which is just a small syllable that I grabbed and I cut all of the low end out of. We're panning it really harshly. We're adding some delay and some reverb, and it's creating this really nice whisper ambient effect behind the vocal. And it's a small thing like that that really fill out your track. There's one more element here, and it's this little vocal pad thing that I just borrowed from Black Octopus or Splice or something. Fills out the ambient sections and the build-ups and stuff like that. But other than that, that is essentially Static, my song with Zashanell, or Zashanell. And I hope you guys enjoyed this breakdown video. If you did, make sure to follow me on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, and anything else. You can go and subscribe to my YouTube channel. I actually do videos like this all the time, not just for Anjuna, but all of my songs that I release, I do a video like this for. And if you did have any questions for me regarding this song or any of my other music, let me know in the comment section below or send me a message on Twitter or Instagram. I will try to get back to them. I always do. I hope that you producers out there learned something from this video, and I hope that you guys are staying creative and, you know, have some peace of mind during this international pandemic. I'm Julian Gray. I will see you guys in the next one, and I will talk to you guys later.